Hello, I'm Richard Lyle, Head of Government Services here at Interlink in Tokyo, and I'm here with my colleague this morning, Heidi Salmela, to talk about investment in the Japanese market. So Heidi, how would you summarize FDI out of Japan?
So actually, the investment from Japan to overseas grew by 10% last year to $160 billion, making it the second largest investor globally right after the United States. This hasn't gone unnoticed, so we've seen a number of foreign governments establish a local presence in Japan the past year.
Can you give any examples of those offices?
Yes, of course. So for example, from the United States, we had the state of New Jersey establish an office just recently.
So where do you see the biggest opportunities for FDI out of Japan?
So decarbonization is of course a hot topic. Japan is aiming to be carbon neutral by 2050, and to get there, Japan is estimating it to require $990 billion. And as such, Japan just recently announced an investment of over $100 billion to the hydrogen sector over the next 15 years. And some of it will be used to actually developing the local supply chains with countries like Australia. Another important opportunity for investment is, of course, the healthcare market. Japan ranks third in the healthcare market globally, and the Japanese pharmaceutical and medical devices companies are looking for opportunities overseas. Just recently, a Japanese materials and pharmaceutical company, Teijin, announced an investment in a US startup called Garwood Medical Devices to collaborate in R&D.
So can you give some examples of notable overseas investments?
Sure. So we had a Japanese developer, Tokyo-based announcing a $2 billion investment in renewables in Europe. The company has already acquired 2 solar power stations in Spain. Another good example is a trading house, Marubeni, announcing investment of £10 billion to invest in green hydrogen and offshore wind projects in UK. And then in Asia, we had a Japanese electronic component manufacturer, Meiko, investing in an electronic components facility for circuit boards, a production facility in northern Vietnam.
So what are some of the key considerations when dealing with potential Japanese investors?
Yeah, so the decision making might take some time, but it's very process driven. It is important that the foreign governments nurture the relationship with the Japanese HQs and the key staff, even when it seems like there is no immediate opportunity. Japanese companies are also quite risk averse, so it might be helpful for the foreign governments to actually introduce the potential investors to potential partners and customers to show that there's opportunities. It may also be helpful to introduce the potential investor to already an existing Japanese investor to address their specific concerns.
So can you tell us about some of the multipliers and how they help?
Sure. So there is the Japan External Trade Organization, JETRO. They help Japanese companies expand overseas. They're well connected with Japanese companies and can help on how to actually work with the Japanese companies. There is also the Japan Business Federation, Keidanren, that represent Japanese companies overseas, but they also advocate for trade policies on government level. There are also industry-specific associations, so these are good organizations to identify and engage with when, for example, the Economic Development Office is looking for an investment from a specific sector like clean tech or semiconductors. And then there is more region-specific organizations such as ASOA, the American State Office Association, which is representing the US states in the Japanese market.
So what advice would you give to an EDO considering entering your market?
So the most important thing is having a local presence, having a local office. The Japanese companies will value having local staff and the fact that they can access the necessary information easily and better yet in Japanese. When you have a local staff, it's also easy to stay in regular contact, whether it means doing a brief visit to the HQ to share latest information or just sending a newsletter in Japanese to a wider audience. It is also important for the EDOs to be patient. As I mentioned before, the decision making will take time, and Japanese companies like very detailed information, not just about the incentives of the location, but also typically the surroundings and potentially the Japanese community. So providing that information will then ensure that they choose that location later on.